Thank you for making it all the way over here to my dear fellow panelists of today's panel on European research on circular textiles, who will represent best practice initiatives on scale. And I would like to introduce Professor Rebecca Earley, from the director of the Circular Design, the Center for Circular Design at the University of the Arts London. She will present the Hareware Project to us, and Dieter Stellmach, researcher at the DITF, the German Institutes for Textile and Fiber Research in Denkendorf, close to Stuttgart in the beautiful south of Germany. And Dieter will present the TRIC project to us later on. So I found pretty remarkable that, or what I learned in the past 3 days, that moving towards a regenerative fashion system is a truly collaborative approach and not an easy challenge to tackle. And while Kathy and Sala introduced an initiative to push the demand on the consumer side, there's a call to legislators to come up with regulations to push the industry to move forward. But let's not underestimate the role of research, and we would like to take a deeper dive into this topic today. So let's start with introductions to the projects that I just mentioned, and then we have time for a Q&A afterwards. Over to you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here today. It's so lovely to meet my collaborators. We've been working on this project, the Hareware Project, for the last 18 months, and we've managed to write a bid and get it approved and work on it with never meeting. So anything's possible. We can do so much online together. Great. So I'm going to talk about the Hareware Project. It's a huge honour and pleasure to be able to do that. Let me get to the slide. There we go. Yes, the Hareware Project, it has 15 partners from across 13 countries. We're aiming at the creation of a European ecosystem for locally produced circular textiles and clothing made from bio-based resources. So many of the things that you guys have been talking about over the last 3 days, I mean, just so much resonance. So it's really great that this is a project where we're really focusing down. The bio-based material solutions will build further on the latest bio-based polyester and cellulose developments. We've got partners on board looking at design strategy, the biorefinery, the fiber spinning, the construction, the finishing, and then also best use, repair, reuse, and recycling. We're used, of course, to a global industry which often sees a single product be created and used in different continents. We know that this creates a carbon footprint, but it also creates supply chain vulnerabilities. And this globalization has created an erosion of cultural traditions and craftsmanship too. As yesterday's discussion here revealed, local is taking on new meaning as we try to bring carbon emissions down, but we also seek to make our textiles and clothing in more fair and sustainable ways on all fronts. This research, therefore, brings together new bio-based materials and applies them to products and cycles in localized contexts to create circular fashion loops. For the bio-based materials research, we're taking agricultural waste, straw, manure, and seaweed to make new fibers that don't need to draw on land that could be used for food. We're experimenting to find the right feel and function for these textiles, asking what garments can we best replace with these new fibers. We're also testing how fiber and fabric construction and finishing can reduce microfiber pollution. The Hareware Project aims to understand new bio-based fibers for clothing made used and reused in specific geographic locations. So these regional hubs will link local resources to create new material and product flows. The microfactory networks will have the advantage of using digital tools to connect up all the stages. You've actually seen some good examples of that in the adverts just before the talk. We're exploring circular approaches to create design guidelines which are focused on the specific attributes and qualities of these new materials coming through. So what you'll find quite often is the sort of guidelines out there are quite generalized, and you're working with materials and actually they don't apply, all those rules really don't apply. So we really need to get much more detailed around what kind of materials to use in what kind of situations. So in other words, how will these bio-based materials work best in circular fashion loops? Of course, we're intending the products we make to last as long as possible. And we have partners focusing on repair and reuse, as well as recycling at product level. But we're also finding out more about appropriate application and pace. And this is one of my big things, is like not everything can be slow and last forever. We've got multiple paces, and there's a woeful lack of research really around these paces. So the project is kind of covering, what you've been finding out in this event is just how complex all these different loops are and how many people need to be involved. So no project can obviously do every part of the life cycle. So the solid yellow lines, those are the bits that we are covering, and the broken dot lines, those bits that we're not covering. So really when we get to the end of the life of this bio-based material, we're looping it back into further product types, but we're not reprocessing that bio-based material in the next stage. So I'm looking forward to that being my next project, maybe. But we're really hoping to, I think we'll bring clarity around key parts of these flows. And right now it's been really exciting to create this materials collection, to get our hands on all these different bio-based materials from all over the place, actually, and then begin to categorize them to really understand what their raw material resources, what have they been made from, how have they been made, sort of what format do they take, and then how should we be reprocessing them. And we're starting to develop these kind of like games and interactions where we can teach how to use bio-based materials in appropriate ways. And then that's building this ability for us to understand what garment, what material, what flow, what use, what end of life, and really work towards very specific guidelines that will be digitized by Circular Fashion here in Berlin into a software feature, so that this will be able to be accessed, and really this information should flow. We'll have analog tools and digital tools by the end of it. So right now, lots and lots of mapping, lots of detailed decisions coming through, and yeah, watch this space really. That's all from me.
Thank you, Becky. Exciting times ahead. So I'm very proud to be part of that project, and let's move on with that. And thanks to European public funding, we can offer those resources and the results of those projects also to SMEs and organizations of all sizes in the future. I would like to hand over to Dieter Stellmach to introduce the TRIC project that tackles this enormous challenge of moving from linear to circular from a whole different angle using blockchain technology. Over to you.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you here for having the possibility to present here the TRIC project. And complementary to what Becky has presented, it is not about the physical implementation of circularity, it is more about the digital implementation. And that, so closing the, let's say, the gap, the data gap, what has been heard before. My background is not fashion. My background is not a fashion designer. I'm a systems engineer working since a long time in the field of communication and cooperation along the textile and clothing supply chain. When we started some 20 years ago, now it is closing to a circle, to a textile circle. About the question, traceability, transparency, I think there's no need really to repeat it again. If you see this textile garbage, what is inside, we want to know where does it come from, who made it, how was it made, and what to do with it. And then, let's say, moving to the digital layer, which means who needs which information and how. And blockchain has been already mentioned. Blockchain is a good tool, a good mean for making or for managing data, transparency data in a safe and secure way. And this was also the starting point for the TRIC initiative, which is also a European research project. And the idea was, okay, to take this blockchain possibilities, to use it for data management, to implement it, to package it into services and into a marketplace. That's a team out of 30 companies and organizations in the textile industry, in the clothing industry, also in the IT, because I think you can imagine that if we focus on blockchain and service orientation, a lot of IT is necessary. And also we focus to standardization and harmonization of communication in the textile and clothing chain. And we have also in this, for this topic some partners inside. Oops, okay. I thought I animated this slide, but it does not work, so it's a little bit complicated to... okay, let me try to explain. In the middle, you can see the circle, the textile and clothing circle, starting with a natural fiber on the top. Here, it is indicated a sheep. In this case, we focus to woolen fibers. Then we continue the circle with spinning, with weaving, with finishing, garment making, then retail and logistics, coming to the consumer, and at the end, recycling. And we also focus to reuse and remake of used and unused clothing and other, let's say, pre-consumer wastes. We have all the members of the textile and clothing chains in companies, mainly SMEs, located in a set of European and non-European countries. We even start from the sheep farm or from the alpaca farm in Southern America. And okay, what we want to implement, what we want to develop is a service marketplace. We do not collect the data itself. We enable the industry to collect and communicate data about transparency and traceability. We have designed 6 services, which is a starting point for our marketplace: traceability and PCO, circular assessment, social assessment, of course the CO2 footprint, and also important for the industry is the anti-counterfeiting, and for the workers on the one side, but also for the consumers, the health protection. The actors in these use cases are, of course, the industry itself, which inserts data. You can see it in the bottom, which also uses data, but not only the manufacturer, also trading and business is partner of this, let's say, of this ecosystem. Product development, which has been mentioned already by Becky before, is an important, let's say, user and applicant of the data which we can provide. And we are also open for further service providers, and we will of course go with our harmonization to policymakers and to training, education and research. Just to show you a little bit what is behind you, I want not and I cannot explain in detail all the technical, IT technical aspects which you see in the blue boxes in the middle and below. On top you may recognize again the 6 services which we implement and the marketplace, and in order to make it available and to make it open for the industry itself, but also for other service providers, we need this complex IT infrastructure which is going to be developed in the next 2 years, let's say. This was just to give you an impression of the TRIC initiative, and I invite you to join, to follow us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dieter. Thank you very much also to highlight what tremendous opportunities are ahead of us and challenges, of course, applying blockchain as a technology to verify and validate circularity claims to actually avoid what we have seen in sustainability a couple of years back, which then can result in circularity washing. I don't know, some clever journalist will probably come up with a buzzword for that. But as you you're involved in various circularity in textiles and fashion-related projects on a European scale, I want to invite you to take us on a reality check. So obviously, we're still stuck in a linear system, so the majority of the industry is. So let's be a bit provocative, probably, and maybe you can share with us what are the key roadblockers at the moment from your point of view that hinders a transformation from linear to circular at scale? Maybe Becky, you can start.
It kind of answering this question could make me very rich, couldn't it? Like, have I got the answers to this? Look, there are problems at every stage of the life cycle in making these flows work. I mean, we know that with fashion, we have so many blends. So contamination and blends is a huge problem. The sorting and collecting is really outdated as well. So there's a struggle there. But actually, people have a huge amount of stuff in their wardrobes, and that doesn't flow back through the clothing systems. So it's this sort of interrelationships between the materials and the flows, and there's breaks in all of that. And the problem is we haven't got to a point where we've got a granular picture of those material types going into the right place. And then I think TRLs, technology readiness levels, we know we can recycle materials. We're getting to the point where we sort of know how to recycle any material, but we're not getting the investment fast enough to scale up. And of course, that means money. And so as long as linear is cheaper, we're always going to have an uphill battle. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we can see now evidence that carbon targets can be met by using recycled fibers and by putting materials back into loops. We know there are benefits. We need to know a little bit more about exactly which materials, in which contexts, where the biggest gains are. But yeah, I mean, lots of blocks, lots of challenges.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You want to add on to that?
Yes. Complementary to what you mentioned, Becky, I think we have a very, very broad diversity in textiles and clothing, in design, in company structures, in materials, in the fiber types we use, in the technologies. We are spread it worldwide. We have company dimensions from small fashion designer companies up to very, very big brands. And we need some kind of harmonization of, let's say, the data which are needed, which are required, which are available, might lead to some let's say, more technical things, ontologies about textile structures, about fashion. This is, for me, one main aspect, that there's a broad diversity and there's a need to harmonize it, maybe even to standardize it. I do not really like the word standardization because it is urging something. But if we harmonize it, we must not forget, we should not forget that we should not limit our creativity space. This is one very, very important aspect for me, which hinders the take-up.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for sharing this, and unfortunately already our time is flying by. So this is already that's a perfect handover to the last panel of today. So probably we can continue this discussion after we listened to some of the policy representatives, what they have in mind and what is coming up to actually make that connection. So I think you will be approached. So if you have any questions about the Hareware and the Trig projects, I can only invite you to join the community following the websites. You can register there. You can get access to pretty comprehensive resources pool. It's all open education. It's all open source. It's free. It's accessible. And I wanted to highlight that and thank my fellow panelists. And it was a pure joy to have you here in real life, and hope to continue the good collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.